Hey, what's up everybody? So today we're going to show you how to put a smart mirror on a Raspberry Pi Zero, and I found a neat little guide online and an image to quickly download and flash onto an SD card. This right here is my original smart mirror. I have another video, make sure to check it out if you want to see how to put it on a regular Raspberry Pi. This is the Raspberry Pi Zero here. It's a smaller board, it's a lot cheaper, it's about 20 bucks. And as you can see here, I've got it on my big screen TV because I was just setting it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flash it. There's my original smart mirror right there, and I'm going to copy my configuration over from that Raspberry Pi to the Raspberry Pi Zero. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get the parts together. So let's go ahead and pull those out because there's a few parts you need to get to be able to do this build. All right. And so what we're going to need to get is we have to get a series of cables to be able to interact and basically use the Raspberry Pi Zero as well as power it. And then also we need an SD card. So just a few things here. Let's go ahead and go through the parts. So you've got a Raspberry Pi case. Some of these kits you can get on Amazon with the full kit. Basically comes with the board and everything. There's the power cable. There's the case again. And then of course an SD card. This is really important. Make sure to get a fast SD card. If you get a crappy one, it's going to make a huge problem later down the road. There's the Pi board, and then this is the micro USB to USB female cable. That's for your USB keyboard because you need to be able to type in commands and actually set up the Raspberry Pi Zero. There's the keyboard. And then you also need a mini HDMI to HDMI cable. Again, if you get a Cana kit, it comes with all of this. And then, of course, the HDMI cable, so it can basically display the Raspberry Pi Zero on the screen. So we've got all the parts here. Again, you need the power cord, the micro USB to USB, the SD card. Make sure to get like an extreme or an ultra SanDisk if you're going to go with SanDisk because they go up to about 100 megabytes per second. Also, they don't get corrupt as easy as the really crappy SD cards do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this SD card here, and I've got a USB adapter for a micro USB. And then what I'm doing is we're going to look at the original guide here. Credit goes to Emmanuel Contreras. He wrote a nice little guide, but it takes a long time to set it up if you do it manually. Down towards the bottom of his article, it was really nice because it actually shows a setting or configuration where you actually just download a pre-made image that he put together, which is really convenient. And then there's just a few settings you have to set up, like the Wi-Fi, and then updating the magic mirror because you'll get an update error. I've also got a guide as well on my site, and it's got all the parts that you need as well as the code that you've got to do. And my original smart mirror video is down at the bottom as well too, because I wanted to clean it up and distill it a little bit because his guide is pretty long and there's a lot of comments in it as well. So you can see the image here. There's going to be a link for that down in the description. You're going to want to click that image, and then basically what you're going to do is you're going to download it. It's going to take a while because it's a pretty big image. I think it's like a few gigabytes. And then basically we're going to use a flash type of SD card flash software. A lot of people out there use Etcher. I use Etcher as well. They have Etcher on Linux. It's for Windows as well. I don't know if they have it on Macintosh, but it's by far the easiest software I've used. And when you put the SD card in the adapter and you put it in your computer, you might have something on it already like I did. You can format it if you want, but you can also just do it with Etcher. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Etcher. We're going to cancel out of this here, and we're going to go ahead and download Etcher. And then what we're going to do is I'm actually going to skip formatting it because you really don't need to do that. The program actually does it itself. And once we download Etcher, then we're going to go ahead and take that image that we downloaded, and we're going to go ahead and throw it on there. So you can see here's Etcher here. I'll go ahead and leave a link for that as well in the description. And when you load Etcher, just like you can see here on the screen, it tells you to select your image. And then once you've selected your image, it should show your SD card there in the middle, and you just hit run. It's going to go ahead and flash it. And then once it's done flashing it, it's going to go ahead and validate it. It could take about somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how fast your computer is. And then while we're waiting, we're going to potentially just start putting together some of the parts for the Raspberry Pi Zero. You might want to put the cables in. You have to be very careful with how you put the cables in, but we're going to go ahead and just shoot through this flash that we're doing just so we can get through it, and I can continue showing you here what I mean. So once it's done flashing, we're going to go ahead and eject the SD card. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the Raspberry Pi Zero board, and then I'm going to go ahead and plug in a couple of the cables here, but I want to show you a couple of things that are important because you don't want to get your connections mixed up, okay? Also, when you get your board, you might have to put your heatsink on it. Go ahead and do that as well too. Some of them come with their heatsink on, but this one didn't, so I just had to stick it on there. It just had a little sticker on the bottom of it, and I stuck it right over the chip, okay? And then I put the SD card in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the case here. There's usually a couple of little screws where you can actually screw it down on the case. Sorry, I'm having issues pulling the case apart here. It'll take a second, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect the power cable, and then we're going to connect the USB cable for the keyboard. There we go. And then you can see inside of the actual case there's some little holes, and we're going to go ahead and just pop that in there. I'm not going to put the screws in right now just for the demonstration, but you can see it just goes in there just like that. Pretty simple, easy. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to plug in the HDMI cable. That one's fairly easy because there's only one end of the cable and you know exactly where it's going to go. And then we're going to go ahead and put in the USB cable for the keyboard, and then we're going to go ahead and put in the power cable, and we're going to plug it into the TV once we get the HDMI connected to the other end of that micro HDMI to HDMI cable. So now I'm going to go ahead and put in this micro USB here, and you got to be careful because you can see there's two. There's one that says USB and there's one that says power in. You want to make sure that the USB the micro USB to the USB female goes into the USB port, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the little USB dongle for the keyboard there in the other end of that, okay? And then we're just going to go ahead and get the keyboard turned on, make sure there's some batteries in it, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and plug in the power cable here. Now, the reason why I mentioned to get a kit is because usually these kits come with the right power supplies. You don't want to get the wrong power supply for this thing because the voltage might be wrong. Sorry, my hand's in the way there. I just had an awkward angle when I was putting this together. I'm still working on curating my videos a little better, so you got to work with me here, and I'm sorry about that. So we got the rest of the case snapped on here, and then we got it plugged in. You can see here on the TV, I've got it plugged in with the HDMI. Now it's loading up. You can see everything's working well, and it's going to take a little while to load. And if you just leave it alone for about 5 minutes, you'll actually notice that the Smart Mirror, Magic Mirror library will load right up because it's all preloaded onto this image that Emmanuel put together here. So again, credit for this original build, and the preloaded image goes to Emmanuel. And once you're done, you're going to see it shows a little console here. And if you wait long enough, it takes about, I want to say about just under 2 minutes after it hits the console. You'll see that the Smart Mirror actually starts up automatically. This kind of was a nuisance because the Smart Mirror would actually, it had some kind of a sleep mode and an auto start where it just kept doing this loop. And when I exited from it, it would keep on going back into it. Now when you see the cursor first and then you see the gray screen, everything's fine. You just got to wait a little longer because it's basically loading up a instance of Chromium browser, and that's how it's, I believe it's running with Midori or something like that, that is actually triggering, or actually part of the package for this build that Emmanuel put together here. Now you see how it says undefined there. It'll just take a little bit longer and it actually will load right up, but you can see over here that there's some things that are missing from my build on my Magic Mirror, because on my Magic Mirror I've got some modules as well as some custom configurations on there that you'll notice, like the calendar, and down at the bottom there's the RSS feed, there's the temperature, and I'll show you later in the video how to put that all together. So Once that's all done loading there, we're going to take a look at the files here. You can see that there's a couple of files when we look in the directory or the home directory where there's chromium start.sh and there's magic or mmstart.sh. Those are what are actually invoking the mirror to start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control W. Control W stops it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename the two files to stop those scripts from starting, because I couldn't figure out any other way to get around that. And it was just a quick way for me to be able to set up the configuration. So what I'm doing is I'm doing sudo cp chromium underscore start.sh and then do a space and do chromium1 underscore start.sh. That renames it. It basically copies it. And then I'm doing the same thing as well with mmstart.sh. Now, you can see that I haven't done anything for mmstart yet, but you can see down there that it's got chromium1 start.sh or underscore start.sh. But you can see after I did the copy, I did sudo rm, which is remove chromium underscore start.sh, and I did the same exact thing with mmstart. I did sudo copy mmstart to mmstart1.sh, and then I removed mmstart, and then I just rebooted it. And then you'll notice after you reboot it that it's not actually auto starting, which is a good thing because the rest of the configuration here we want to go ahead and get set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Wi-Fi file and we're going to go ahead and add our credentials or our SSID and our password for our Wi-Fi. Okay. And so also there was a step in there too. Let's go ahead and expand the file system first. So if you go into sudo raspi-config, you go into your advanced options and then expand the file system. It doesn't matter what order you do it in technically, I don't think, but I didn't find an error or problem in the past when I did them in different order. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go sudo nano, which is our text editor, and we're going to go into that file that he mentions in his article, and then we're going to go ahead and update the SSID. You can see here, this is where I'm putting my wireless network name. That's not really my wireless network name, but put in your Wi-Fi name there for your router, okay? And then you're going to go ahead and put in your password in between the quotes, and then you're just going to hit Control X, and it's going to say, do you want to save it? And you just hit Y for yes and enter. And it's going to ask you file name to write, and just hit enter, and you've saved that file, okay? And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and update the Magic Mirror to the latest library now that we've got the Wi-Fi settings updated. And you might have to reboot it first, so just sudo reboot if you have to. It'll only take a couple minutes, and then we're going to cd into the Magic Mirror directory. So we're just basically going from the console into the Magic Mirror directory, and we're going to do git pull and npm install. What that's going to do is that's going to update the Magic Mirror. Now, you can see here mine says already up to date, and I think here a little bit later in the video I actually show you how to update it if you have any issues, because I had issues in the past updating my Magic Mirror. And so I'm just going to show you right here in my article. You can see if you have problems with it, then what you want to do is do that red code down there. It says, sorry, I'm having issues selecting things here, that git reset -- hard semicolon git clean -df semicolon. Once you do that, then you're going to do git pull and npm install, and you want to do those both within the actual Magic Mirror directory. Now, one thing I have to show here, and it's a little caveat warning, is there seems to be some issues with updating the Raspberry Pi, and I don't know if it has to do with the latest Raspbian update or what, but you can see here that I was following the comments, and it looked like the original author was going to go through and see what was going on and see if he could find a fix for it. But a lot of people were having the same issue when you try to do an update, you know, sudo apt-get update, or you try to update your Raspberry Pi 0. There's a weird error that says no pub key found. And so I just want to point that out there because that's an issue that I was having. And if you do have update issues, here's what you do for the Magic Mirror. You do the git reset -- hard git clean df, and then you see how it says removing core, and then do git pull and npm install, and that's fixed. And it took me forever to figure that out on my original Raspberry Pi when I had done this before I even started with the Raspberry Pi Zero. So I hope that helps if anybody has any issues updating the Raspberry Pi Zero Magic Mirror library. But like I said, there's some issues updating just Raspbian Stretch or whatever, and so I don't know exactly the workaround with that. When I do figure it out, I'll make sure and add it in the description and the video. But what I'm going to do now that I've got it connected to the Wi-Fi, I'm also going to show you, you can, from your Windows computer, if you have a bash shell or a Windows subsystem of Linux, you know, if you don't know how to set that up, you should probably check it out. It's really cool. You can actually do a secure shell into your console for your Raspberry Pi and do all the work from your computer. So I'm doing this on Windows now, and what I'm basically doing is, now that I'm done updating the Magic Mirror and doing all the steps in the article, I'm just copying those original scripts back to their original names, okay? And so you can see that I'm just doing sudo copy chromium1_start.sh to chromium_start.sh, and then I'm doing sudo copy mmstart1.sh to mmstart.sh, and then I'm just removing those copies that I had made at the beginning of the video. And once you do that, you can just reboot it and everything should work just fine, and it'll actually auto start your Magic Mirror. Now that it's connected to the internet, the undefined and all that other weird stuff should remove itself, because it can actually connect to the internet. And now we've got the actual updated Magic Mirror. You might get an alert up at the top that says a new update available for the Magic Mirror, and that means you have to do the git pull and npm install. Okay, and so you'll have to cd into your Magic Mirror directory if you have that issue. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my config file over from my other Raspberry Pi 3. And so I'm just basically cding into the directory, in the Magic Mirror directory, and then the config directory, and then I'm going to edit sudo nano config.js, and basically that's the configuration file. And so you can see in here it says your OpenWeather API key. What I'm doing is I'm going to copy my API keys over from my other Raspberry Pi, but if you want to get a key so you can get that little cool weather forecast that I had on the top right of my other mirror, basically you go to OpenWeatherMap and you can get an API key for free. And basically you just have to verify your email and you can get the key really quick. And there's some really cool things you can do with that key, and there's other modules in the Magic Mirror library. If you go to GitHub and check out the Magic Mirror module, the Magic Mirror library, there's a bunch of other modules that are custom that you can actually add to your Magic Mirror. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting in my OpenWeatherMap keys in this JSON file, and then the config file. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and change this to Chico, because that's where I'm located at. And then what I'm going to do is, you can go to any news website that's like local around your area and basically look for an RSS feed, and it'll be usually an XML file, and you want to grab that URL and throw it in right here, and you'll find this kind of towards the bottom of that config file. So you just grab that XML file, and so what I'm doing is I'm actually grabbing the RSS feed from my local news. It's Chico News and Review. And what that's going to do is that's going to actually put the news down in the bottom of my mirror. And then for your calendar, you can get a URL if you know how to get your iCal, or it's like, it ends in like .ics URL for your calendar. You can basically add your calendar as well too. So you saw the events on my other Magic Mirror that was up on the wall at the beginning, the one that I had with the regular Raspberry Pi 3. And now that I've got all of those updated, I just hit Control X and yes, and I updated it. And then what I'm doing is I'm just rebooting my Magic Mirror from my my laptop. And so now it's just rebooting, and those modules should all show up. And the only one that's missing from my original Magic Mirror that's up on the wall, the one that's in the Raspberry Pi 3, is my my temperature sensor, because I haven't installed that yet. I've got to actually grab a couple of wires and connect it to the different data points, and then pretty much I have to add a Python library or something like that. But I just didn't want to do it for the sake of this demonstration, because all of this you can actually do by yourself, and if you don't have a temperature sensor, it just made more sense not to show that one as I just wanted to replicate the Raspberry Pi 3 and throw it up on my Raspberry Pi Zero. And so now basically what I can do is I can take my my Raspberry Pi Zero and I can go ahead and pretty much just swap it out. And you can see there it's got, let me go ahead and reboot this one more time. It looks like I forgot to reboot it here because it's still showing the New York Times in the original configuration, but here we go. Now you can see that it's got my calendar up in the top left, and then it's got Chico News and Review at the bottom, and there's the OpenWeatherMaps configuration that was set up with the OpenWeatherMaps API key. I hope you liked my video. Make sure to leave a comment, check out my website, www.thesmarthomeninja.com, and subscribe for more content. Thank you.